Hello there everybody, it is me XfreezerBunny and welcome back to another Sims 4 speed build. So this is part 2 of my Italian Renaissance speed build. I think this speed build is going to have 3 parts, so this is the second to the last part. And we are starting the interior decorating segment of this build. First things first, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I have a new microphone, finally, after 5 years of using my good old Blue Snowball microphone. I finally upgraded to a Blue Yeti, of course. Really interesting because when I first got my Blue Snowball, content creation wasn't a big thing in my country. So getting a blue microphone was actually really hard. My Blue Snowball was actually bought all the way from Hong Kong. I had to ship it all the way from Hong Kong. But nowadays, it's a lot easier to find good quality microphones for a relatively good price. I was like, you know what? Let's just upgrade to a much better microphone. And I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but I personally can tell the difference. And it sounds a lot better actually. So let me know what you think in the comments below. But in my last video, some of you did want me to talk about Renaissance architecture and art history. To be honest, I'm not an expert, but I will be sharing some of my favorite beats for you guys who are fellow history buffs like myself. First of all, I do want to ask you guys a question. Who is your favorite Renaissance artist? I feel like it's going to be between 2 artists specifically. It's either going to be Leonardo or Michelangelo. I would be really surprised if you said something else other than those 2 because they're kind of like the 2 most mainstream Renaissance artists. I think I'm a bit biased because I do prefer Leonardo out of all of the other Renaissance artists, but I think that's because we literally have the same name. But also, there's just something about Leonardo da Vinci's art that's just so enigmatic. Actually, his whole life is so enigmatic. It's actually so interesting. I've seen quite a few documentaries like 10 years ago. Because there was this whole thing, I'm not sure if you guys remember, in the early 2010s, there was this whole thing about one of Leonardo's paintings being rediscovered. I believe it was the Salvator Mundi painting and it was going on auction. So there was this whole kind of like revival craze about Leonardo, who he was, his paintings. He hasn't really done much, hasn't he? You know, he has quite a few iconic works like the Mona Lisa and the very problematic Last Supper, which is in a really sorry state. I saw a documentary on it and I feel so bad for the painting because it literally looks like it's in ICU. Come on, like, but you know, they have to do it for preservation purposes, which is great because as you all know, I am an advocate for heritage conservation. So, but that being said, there is a certain quality to Leonardo da Vinci's paintings that I feel like is just so, I don't know why. I can't even, you know, put a finger on it, but there's something hauntingly beautiful about Leonardo da Vinci's art. And I think my favorite painting of his is actually a lesser known painting. It's the Lady with the Ermine, which I think is displayed in a Polish museum somewhere. Like I said, there's just something hauntingly beautiful about that painting, and it is beautiful. To Michelangelo's credit, he has done some pretty iconic paintings. Of course, the God and Adam painting. I don't actually know what it's called. Is it The Creation of Man? I might have to fact check that. But I feel like Michelangelo's more of a sculptor anyway. He is, of course, really iconic for the famous Adam statue, which is, you know, very very naked. And he also did like the Pieta. I think that's his other most famous work, which I have seen a replica of it in person because there's one in like a cathedral here where I'm from. So I saw that when I was in college, by the way. So yeah, for the record, I'm not an expert. I like Renaissance art or anything. I just took a course on history and architecture, so part of that was actually a course on like Western architecture. So it's basically just like your basic timeline of, you know, the most important beats in Western architecture and art history. By the way, one of the most underrated Renaissance artists is Brunelleschi. Filippo Brunelleschi. I am surprised we're not talking more about him, considering he's literally the father of Renaissance architecture. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you probably haven't heard of him at this point, because I feel like when people think of Renaissance architecture, they probably think of like, I don't know, maybe Andrea Palladio, but come on, Brunelleschi needs more love. He literally is the forefather of Renaissance architecture. If you didn't know, he's the guy responsible for the dome of the Florence Cathedral, which I think took them like hundreds of years to do, which is really interesting when you realize that the European cathedrals literally took centuries to build. It's pretty crazy, but you know, it's a pretty interesting story of how he convinced the clergy to hire him, basically. I'm not sure if this is a true story or if this is just an anecdote or something, but he did like the egg thing where he didn't want to reveal his structure for the dome because he was scared that people would copy him. So he just did like the egg thing where he basically smashed an egg on its, you know, bottom side in front of the clergymen and told them that if he can make this egg stand on its own, then he can make the dome stand, basically. Makes sense, right? I did a really bad job of explaining it to you guys, but that's the best I could do. This is a pretty short video for the record, so I'm kind of like pressed for time. By the way, the Florence Cathedral is insane. I believe it's like still the biggest like dome in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Or it's like the biggest like unsupported dome. I don't know. It's one of those things. Before that, the structure that held that title was actually the Pantheon, the Pantheon in Rome. So see, I'm starting to forget my architectural history. It's been a while actually since, you know, I've taken that. So it's, you know, quite fun to recall. Hopefully I'm doing my architectural history professor proud, because we were pretty close actually. Architectural history was my favorite course to take in college, so I was pretty close with my architectural history professor, and I don't want to flex, but I may or may not have had all 4s on my architectural history. By the way, in the college where I went to, the highest grade you can have is 4, and I may or may not have that for my architectural history, so there you go. But anyway, for the interiors of this build, I did go for a more contemporary interior mixed with some Renaissance beats. I think the most Renaissance room in this whole entire build would probably be the room that I would like to call the Florentine room, which is basically kind of like the library drawing room area. It's one of the first rooms that we furnished. That one had a lot of like, you know, neoclassical elements to it. The dining room has more of like a Renaissance feast kind of vibe, so I included a lot of, you know, these, you know, CC food, which is from ZXTA. Very amazing CC creator. I've been using their CC since like 2018. They're so good. Most of the CC in this build, however, is from Felixander, Harry, and the Gym 07. Like I said in my previous video, it's gonna be a nightmare to list down all of the CC, but I will do my best. And I also did use quite a few packs in this build as well. I feel like the country kitchen kit is really coming into its own. I'm starting to really like that kit, especially when it comes to making these more rustic builds. I feel like country kitchen does a really good job at that. By the way, the kitchen, I really wasn't sure because I really didn't want to go for like a historical kitchen. I wanted it to feel more contemporary, so I looked at the kitchen from Call Me By Your Name. That was the main inspiration for it. By the way, I've been trying to recall some good like Renaissance TV shows and movies. I honestly had such a hard time trying to remember because there isn't actually a lot of good Renaissance TV shows and movies. Like one of my favorite movies ever is Ever After, which technically takes place in the Renaissance, but it's more of like a, I wouldn't say fantasy, but it's definitely not, you know, realistic. I don't know. It's amazing. I love Ever After so much. Definitely one of my favorite romantic movies, and I'm not a type of person who is into like the whole romance movies and stuff, but Ever After is a forever classic for me. I also really enjoyed The Borgias, which is a TV series that ran in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. It got cancelled after like 3 seasons, which is kind of unfortunate because the author specifically made it for like the 4-season runtime, but they canceled it at like the last minute, which is pretty annoying. But other than that, I don't really remember a lot of like good Renaissance TV shows. If you would consider like Rain or Leonardo like a Renaissance TV show, I don't. Those are more fantasy in my opinion, or like highly stylized you know, historical TV shows. Not really pure dramas in my opinion, but yeah, there's quite a lot of pure dramas that are incoming. I'm so excited for season 2 of Bridgerton, and I've been loving The Gilded Age. I feel like this year is gonna be the year of good dramas, because last year was a bit meh, to be honest. The only show I really enjoyed last year was The Witcher, but other than that, everything was a bit meh. But anyway, I hate to end this video on that note, but it's a pretty short video and we are running out of time. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up right here. I hope you all enjoyed it. Once again, I want to thank you all so much for watching. You all have an awesome day. Enjoy the rest of the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.